Okay, I was a little hesitant to talk about this topic up until Dr. Gutterwall pointed out that it's okay. Don't be afraid to step on the toes of your community a little bit. So with that, I start with my topic, Izzat, or honor. What is Izzat? What is honor? And who is responsible for it? Who is responsible for transmitting it? And who is responsible for receiving it? So there's these sayings that are typical, I'm focusing on Punjabi households where Ghar di Izzat, the honor of the home, or Kudiyan de hattan vich Izzat hundi hai, so the honor is in the hands of the women. So whatever you choose to do with it reflects on your family and the family values. So the definition of Izzat, it's a difficult concept because at one side it can mean reputation, it can mean success, your status, and on the other hand, dignity and modesty and the chastity of a woman. But on the other hand, it also can be a site of shame and dishonor, and so you can also lose it. And that site is often the woman herself that takes upon the whole ideology of Izzat and shame. So there I get the title, To Them, My Honor is Their Shame, the experiences of second-generation Punjabi females in Canada. What I wanted to do was invite the stories of Punjabi females and explore the ways in which Izzat was played a part in their everyday lives in a collective way where it's a family and it's a community, and also in a personal way, how they viewed it. So I conducted semi-structured interviews of 7 females who were born and raised in Canada. They identified with the Punjabi culture linguistically, culturally, and with the Sikh religion. These females were from Brampton and Mississauga in the Toronto area predominantly, and they were all unmarried and they were single, and the ages ranged from 16 to 30, which was interesting because the definition of honor changes when you're 16 to when you're 30. I could have focused on the other themes like the intergenerational changes towards the attitudes of, like, let's say marriage or dating and relationships, but I wanted to focus on Izzat because it was something that they were hesitant to talk about. Even I was hesitant to talk about it. So I asked these women to start off with, what does it mean to you on a personal level? And they responded with independence, having and voicing my opinion, being successful, standing up for what I feel is right. Then I asked them, what does it mean to your family? What does it mean to your community? They responded with, to be modest, to be a good Punjabi girl, to whatever that entails, to be a homebody, to kind of isolate yourself, to stay at home, to not kind of compromise this whole Izzat when you go outside of the house, and to get married to who my parents feel is right for me. So that brings about mixed messages, especially to the second-generation females that are being raised in these households where there's this blurred line between Sikhi and then the Punjabi culture. There was also a need to protect and preserve the Punjabi culture, to preserve the heritage, because of the hurt that we faced, because of the extreme violence of 1984, and also partition, right? Women were raped. They were shamed, right? These talks, they were sexually assaulted. I mean, these talks, like everyone's talking about, they haven't really been healed from that. And how do they transmit, how do they process 84? And how do they transmit these cultural values to their daughters, right? Are they trying to preserve culture, or are they trying to preserve the woman herself? So, with that being said, I really wanted to focus on how these women want to express these feelings and want to bring this change to this age-old ideology of what honor is. So to begin with, I focused on the whole traditional and cultural roles that Punjabi females are supposed to embody, which enforce, to conform to these roles. For example, one woman expressed that, my mother just wants to sculpt me into the proper and perfect daughter-in-law. That anything I do when I get married will always reflect on my mother and how she brought me up. It was not about me, rather the honor of my family, especially when I got married. So there's a different view of honor. There's a transition from daughter to daughter-in-law, and how everything kind of works back to this whole thing about honor. What does it even mean? And so they're burdened with carrying this ideology with them wherever they go, whether it's school, work, socialization, and within the household. And so that brings me to this other topic we talked about, was socialization, or too much of it, how that can compromise your Izzat. and how they resisted to that. Because, at one side, there's two cultures. This Canadian culture that embraces the individuality, the thinking for yourself, right? And then there's also this other culture that kind of embodies this notion of, instilling fear or threats or isolation, right? So talking about socialization and talking with the younger generation, like talking with 16 and 17-year-olds about it, they brought about a different narrative of what it meant. For example, one female said, I just went across the street of my school to get lunch. I had gotten 10 missed calls from my mom. I called back and she yelled at me that I'm wandering the streets, that other people are calling her and telling her that I did her bestie, like I ruined her image. But I just went across the street for lunch. And to her, it was this independence, she just wanted to go across the street for lunch. But to her mother, someone saw her across the street and that was a sight of shame, was gossiping and you're compromising your family's izzat by doing that. Preserving and protecting also meant, to an extent, silencing and kind of blaming. One woman I interviewed opened up about an experience, and that shook her and her family's values in essence, because that's not how she looked. That's not how she looked about how the Punjabi culture was and how Sikhi kind of blurred. So she says, I went to a reception with my friends where I didn't really know many people. There I was harassed by a guy. I made a huge commotion about it. I confronted him in front of my friends. I was hurt, but I was also ashamed. But I was proud that I had the courage to stand up, So when I went home, I cried to my mom. Instead of comfort, she yelled at me, this is why girls don't go out at night. What were you doing there anyway? So in one way, it's like, okay, she was proud that she stood up to something, right? But in another way, she was not seen as the victim of something, but rather tarnishing her honor. So socialization can do that. So it's expected that the proper Punjabi girl be a homebody, be isolated, be family-oriented. There's nothing wrong with that. However, you lose that. You lose a sense of independence and a sense of yourself by doing that. And you start to live this double life. I found that the younger females spoke of their mothers transmitting these values. So we look at patriarchy and how the father or the brother have this heavy hand in transmitting these values. However, talking to them, it was about their mothers, their turbulent and toxic relationships that they had formed because of this whole notion of fear, izzat, isolation, this threat that was always there. And it was severely gendered. It wasn't the same for their brothers. It wasn't the same for the males of their family. So throughout that, I also noted a lot of changes, a lot of intergenerational changes about the collective and the personal view of izzat, right? I interviewed a 30-year-old. She said, I'm unmarried and 30. When I was younger, I wasn't allowed to date, talk to guys, you know the deal. And now I'm single, but I'm independent and a career woman. But my mom's still saying that, oh, what are people going to think? Tera vyah nahi hoya. You're 30. But I refuse to get an arranged marriage. There's nothing wrong with arranged marriage. I just refuse. People are always going to think and say something. So these were really powerful statements coming from her because she distinguished between personal izzat, how she felt she was independent, she was career-oriented, she refused to kind of conform to these ideals of what it means to be a proper Punjabi girl. Instead, she still had, a sense of izzat. She was still honorable in what she did, but she distinguished between personal and collective. So, and another theme that I encountered was how Sikhi was used to kind of undress these blurred lines of our culture and of our religion. They're two distinct things, and they both have two distinct values. One female, she talked about how religion, in a way, freed me. Everyone's equal. There's no discrimination against gender. So I use that when I talk to my parents. I understand Sikhi. It's practical, right? Another one said that I'm grateful for that because I know that some of my friends just resent this Punjabi culture because all they've been taught about the culture was this idea of threat, idea of shame. How it's the female's responsibility to not kind of to hold her izzat in a certain light. But she said that because she followed the path of Sikhi, because she embodied those values and virtues on her personal level, that she was able to understand and embrace both Punjabi and the Sikhi culture. So there was a positive light shed on this whole topic of izzat. Throughout these interviews, they defended. A lot of them had the need to defend, no, sometimes it happens. Okay, I understand my mom. I understand where she's coming from. So they had this notion to always defend because they didn't want to bring this this notion that Punjabi culture is bad. It's not. But there's a way to transmit it in a positive light. There's a way to preserve and protect culture and also preserve and protect what it means, not for the woman herself, but as a collective. So, to invite these narratives, to break these silences also was a way to kind of understand that there's something more going on. There's something more, like the emotional and mental well-being of these females that are stuck in this position where they can't distinguish between this idea of fear. They live in this idea of fear, and it's a cycle that's not changing, right? But when they were talking about it, they're more empowered to want to change it, right? They're more empowered to kind of think for themselves of what it means to be honorable or what Izzat means in their lives. So through that, I found that they themselves were a catalyst for change within their households, and they brought that to the way in which I invited these narratives wasn't to talk about only Izzat. It was to talk about their whole experience and how that played a part in like their upbringing, that played a part in their school, their work, and how it's crucial to transmit cultural values and Sikhi values in a positive light and not only stick to like the whole negative ideal of the Punjabi patriarchal culture that we kind of embody on an everyday basis to like just to break that, to change, to be agents of change. And that's it.
Thank you.